In our last group of videos, we highlighted a month-long trip to Europe that we took in September. We visited Amsterdam, a number of Greek islands, and Athens. Then we flew to Croatia, where we visited Dubrovnik and Split and Hvar. Then we flew over to Lake Como, Italy, and spent a few days there. And we trained up over the Alps on the Bernina Express to complete our trip. In this video, Island Time finally gets launched after hurricane season out of the water. We get a bottom job for the boat, we dodge some hurricanes ourselves, and then we do some needed maintenance like replace one of our saloon windows. Brian struggles quite a bit changing the impellers on the engines, and then we do an exhaust elbow on the generator, all to get us ready to go back to the Bahamas for the winter. Have you ever dreamed of selling it all and cruising into the sunset? Well, that's exactly what we did. It's no fun going it alone though, so why don't you join us for the ride? So we had hauled our boat out for hurricane season and found the bottom covered with barnacles after a month and a half without a cleaning, which pretty much meant that the paint shedding properties were failing and we needed a new bottom job. Island Time's running gear, which consists of propellers and rudders, were totally covered in hard growth, which really impeded performance. But thankfully the marina had an expert painter that did a great job and gave us a shiny, smooth new bottom. Look at that spiffy running gear. And while we were in Port Canaveral, we were lucky to be treated to a Falcon rocket launch. So it's what, October 16th? October 16th, and we are in Port Canaveral. We launched Island Time today. Timing was not the best because I guess it's the first fall cold front coming through, and it's blowing 30 plus miles an hour, so we decided to stay here in the marina overnight. You can say it's blowing snot. It's kind of hard to tell behind me, but yeah, it's definitely pretty choppy out there. We were going to go north to Daytona today, but we'll put that off till tomorrow. We launched a little later than we thought we would, but though it's great to be back in the water, it's not what we expected. You always have to be flexible, I guess, when you're a cruiser. But hopefully the winds will subside a little bit and we'll get better days. Should be in the 80s down here. It was 87 the other day, like 3 days ago. So it's Florida this time of year. So got a nice full moon as we leave Port Canaveral. We made our way through one lock into what's called the Barge Canal, which takes you from Port Canaveral over to the Intercoastal Waterway. And we immediately saw some boats that were strewn about from the recent hurricanes. My guess is that people probably anchored in the Barge Canal for protection from the winds, but their anchors didn't hold and they ended up washed up on shore. We're in the canal here, but as soon as we left it into the Intercoastal, we got like 20-mile-an-hour north winds, so it was a pretty choppy ride all the way up to Daytona, but we were happy to get there. It was Biketoberfest when we got to Daytona, and we were happy to catch a set from one of our favorite local bands, Our Friends Electric. A few days later, we went inland to dodge some hurricanes. Sadly, Lori's parents' neighborhood suffered a lot of damage and some historic flooding.
They were lucky with their home, but many homes were flooded out. It would take months for the water to totally recede, and they had to bring in these special pumps to help in the process. Our new salon window had arrived from Canada while we were away, and we were able to uncrate it at the house and check it out. We found some local marine experts to install the window. They did a bang-up job in 2 guys, only 2.5 hours. The hard part was getting the old one out, but the new one went in pretty easy, and I breathed a sigh of relief because I sent in the measurements to have them custom build it, and it came out perfect. We were super happy with the finished product. It matched the other windows really well, and no more crazed and cloudy window to try and look through.
Project for today is replacing our anchor chain, and here is our old anchor chain, and you can see that rust and corrosion here. I know these can be kind of regalvanized, but I think it's time for a new one. Not sure how old this one is, but the metal is actually flaking off. It's about 120 feet, I think, of chain attached to rope or rode. Not quite sure exactly how much, but 100 something feet. We're replacing that as well. Coming out of the windlass, you can see all the flakes of rust here and metal, so it's time this gets replaced. So here we have 120 feet of road or rope and 120 feet of chain. As you can see, we marked it at 30-foot lengths. So 30, 60, 90, 120. And I decided to do one stripe at 30. And then we laid it out on the dock here. And then here's your 30 down here, 60 at the other one, 90, and finally 120 just before we get to the road. So that's the project du jour.
We're trying to complete all these projects before going to the Bahamas, and the next one was to clean up the neglected dinghy. Over time, the hypalon material gets kind of chalky, and also you can get a lot of mold and mildew in it. I ended up using a product made for cleaning the hypalon material, and it did a bang-up job. Letting the cleaner sit for a minute and a little bit of light brushing, and you could see the results, and they look pretty dramatic.
So she's looking good now, all shined up. And then I put some 303 protectant on it, ready for the new Tohatsu 20 horsepower coming. But looks good, got all the mold and oxidation or whatever off of it. Almost looks new.
So our old motor was a Yamaha 8 horsepower, and it was good for just Lori and I, but whenever we had any more people or groceries or water to lug, the boat wouldn't get on plane. So we decided to upgrade to a Tohatsu 20 horsepower. The first 10 hours are a break-in period with a lot of idling and varying the throttle, so I spent a lot of time tooling around the marina trying to break the darn thing in. At one point, Cakes and I went into the intercoastal, and in full throttle we did over 20 miles an hour, so I would say that's pretty darn fast. One other small little techie project was that I realized that since the electronics were installed in 2019, the charts had never been updated, so I went to Garmin, downloaded them to a new memory card, and installed 2024 charts.
So we're doing a little engine maintenance before we go to the Bahamas. One thing we need to do at least once a year is change the impeller. So the first thing we do is we shut off the water, and the seacock is right down there. And that is the raw water, the seawater, and it goes into the strainer here. And then it follows to the front of the engine here. and around to the back, which you can't see in there, but it is it goes to the impeller, or the impeller housing, which is the water pump. And what that does is it pumps all of the seawater through this thing here, the heat exchanger. Pretty sure this is a heat exchanger. And what that does is the antifreeze circulates around the seawater. It's closed off from that. The seawater goes through tubes, and the antifreeze circulates around it, and it cools that, and then it's expelled out the back. So anyhow, we need to change the impeller, and what the impeller is, it's inside the pump. It looks like this. It is a rubber, kind of like a propeller. And what it does is when the engine comes on, it circulates and draws the water through that inlet hose and then expels it out the boat with the exhaust, and that's how the engine gets cool. So these things wear over time, so you want to change them about once a year. That's the impeller. It comes with a gasket here, and it also comes with it's got a mounting plate on it with 4 bolts, and it has you change those in the process. So it should be fairly easy. There's this little unit here called an impeller puller, and the impeller itself is threaded on one end here. So the old impeller will stick this first bolt in, and then we'll take, or this, I guess it would be a nut, and then we put our wrench on this other one here and tighten this other one, and it goes through the middle here. You see the bolt coming out? It goes through the impeller and pushes the old impeller out because they're in there kind of tight. So this extractor tool will save you hours of work, and it should only be a few minutes. So that's what we're doing right now. Let's see how it goes. Now, in the worst part, in Yanmar's infinite wisdom, this is a 100 horsepower Yanmar, and we've got one on each side of the boat. A lot of engines have the impeller mounted on the front. Say if this was the impeller here, it had 4 bolts, came off, easy peasy. Well, this one is mounted facing backwards. So I have to reach my hand in around here and blind and kind of undo it and replace it. And I think I did it last time that way. If it gets too tough, I will remove this alternator here out of the way, and then I can come over the top. But I'm going to try it without removing the alternator because I'm lazy. And we'll see how that goes. So just a little bit of an update. I was able to get the old impeller out really easy using that puller tool. And it's pretty good shape. It's only been in there for a year. They usually are in pretty good shape after that time. Still pliable and everything, but it's smart to take it out. The problem is there's a cover plate that this goes into a housing and on a little spindle, and then a cover plate goes on top of it. The cover in the housing, there's actually a ring around the outside here, cut into the metal, that accepts an O-ring. This is the O-ring. I couldn't get the O-ring in. I tried for about 3 hours. I tried all kind of fun things, but it didn't work. The problem is the water is leaking by the through hole still and coming through by the impeller, so it's a wet area. This keeps popping out of the groove. So I went and got this Permatex here, this sealant adhesive that was recommended by somebody who works on these boats, and essentially I'll put it on this O-ring and try and get it in there and see if it'll stay in there, so I could put that cover plate back on. So I ended up moving the alternator because I was getting frustrated that I couldn't get the gasket on. And behind here, this hose here is the seawater that comes in, and the pump unit is right back there below it. And then when the pump runs, it expels it out that bottom hose. Well, the thing is, it is leaking when I took the cover off. So what I'm going to do is I am going to remove this hose here, put it to the side, let the water leak out down here into the bilge, and at least it'll get out of my work area, and I think that'll be a better idea. It won't be a wet surface, and then I can finally try and mount that darn O-ring that's been giving me so much trouble. Plus that hose out of my way will make it probably a little easier to work back there. course, this hose is stubborn, so I'm using this little automotive tool. You gently put it between the fitting and the hose and loosens it up, and then should be able to slide it off. So the hose came off fairly easy. I put this wooden bung in it to kind of cork it, just to keep it from not too much water coming out. And here's the fitting. It's just draining whatever water it has inside, no big deal. And then right behind here, if we can get to it, is where the impeller housing is that we've got to unscrew, and as you can see, it's backwards. So it's a bit of a pain in the butt. Well, apparently I was wrong, because this is the raw water entry into the pump, and here's the exit. And when I undid this was still dripping, and the exit hose was still connected. Like, a couple gallons came out. I'm like, can't be coming from, you know, draining out of the engine. So whatever. So anyhow, needless to say, I took this hose off, and I don't know if you could see the drip from that hose. That's where it's coming from. So at least I isolated the pump now. I'm gonna let it dry a little and try and get that gasket in with a little of that sealant. And I have no idea. It's probably heat exchanger there, though I'm not 100% sure. But that's where the raw water is going to. Where it's coming from, I'm not exactly sure. This hose here comes from the tide seal that seals the propeller shaft and lubricates it. And then it enters this line here. It could be coming from there. I'm not sure, but whatever, that's not the problem this time. The problem is getting this in and getting the cover back on the impeller plate.
Anyhow, it finally went in after much frustration, but here's a little angle of where the impeller is, right here at this arrow, and then here's my eyeball looking in from the other side.
So I'm huddled here in the forward compartment of the boat on the port side where the generator is located. And the job of the day is to replace something called a mixing elbow or exhaust elbow on the generator. And the old one potentially can corrode. It's not a good thing. And the new one that I got is stainless steel. It's recommended that it be replaced. I'm going to attempt to do this myself. We'll see how this goes. Take a look at what it looks like. So this is the new stainless steel mixing elbow, and this place with the 4 holes, bolts, is where it bolts to the back of the generator, which is just a diesel engine. And so the exhaust gases go through this port, and then there's a hose that connects up top here, and that's where the raw water or the seawater goes. So the seawater goes through and cools the coolant of the engine, and then gets expelled along with the exhaust in 2 separate chambers here. And the reason it does so is right here, then it connects to a hose which expels it out the boat, this rubber hose here, and through the muffler. And if it was just hot exhaust gases, this hose would melt. But instead, it gets mixed with the seawater here on the way out and comes out of here, and then it won't melt the hose. And this, I believe, is for a temperature sensor that gets screwed into here, so the generator will shut down if it senses that it's too hot. So I don't know if you could see in this hole here, there's kind of 2 separate chambers where the water and exhaust start to mix as it flows downward. So it's kind of mounted like this, it flows down. What you never want the water to do, the seawater, is to flow back into your engine. That's a bad thing. So this mixing elbow is designed to keep the water flowing downward with the force of the flow and gravity, and then out the exhaust. So what I understand is it's really hard to get to the one behind the engine here, to get to all these bolts, but we're going to give it a shot. Now, one more little tidbit is I bought this replacement from HDI Marine, and it comes with a nice little graphite gasket, I guess. And that gasket's got to go between the engine and the mounting here. So between the exhaust elbow, I mean, for the mount. So as we look at the generator, this unit here is the heat exchanger. Right here is a heat exchanger. And the raw water, seawater, comes through here, cools the coolant through some tubes in here, and it gets expelled in the back here. And this hose connects to the top of right here, to the top of this mixing elbow. So the mixing elbow is way under there in the back. That's the existing one here that we're going to take out. So those are the mounting bolts that I've got to get to. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is drain the coolant and take this rubber hose off and get it out of my way so that I have better access to everything down here. You can see there's some corrosion on there. Doesn't look very good. So we're gonna get that off. And that's where the temperature sensor is, and there's that exit pipe. So that's what we're doing. So as far as draining the coolant, there's this little, they call it the service side here, you see this little petcock, and I put a little container here, and a hose is already connected, and I should be able to undo it here, and the coolant should come out here. I might have to uncap it here. This is probably a little bit of a vacuum. Now you can see the coolant start to come out, and this is how I'll drain it. Little by little I'll take it out of here and put it into another jug. Not too hard to do. Okay, so now I got this unit off here that basically goes on the back of the heat exchanger here. And this is the heat exchanger itself, this tube, which would pull right out, except it would pull out the front. So one gasket, the coolant's over here, and the seawater comes out. All of these tubes, I don't know if we could see it there, but the seawater will come out there and then go down into the exhaust elbow here. Here's the old one that I am looking to figure out how to remove. So there's some cables down there and the sensor, so we'll get that out of the way and then figure out how to get to those bolts, especially the bolts underneath.
Thankfully, my good friend Chris on Headway had just the right tool to be able to get to those awkward bolts. Unfortunately, the last nut was corroded on, and it was also stripped, so I couldn't get a wrench around it, and I struggled with it for a while. I could not get it off, so I needed some help.
Here's my friend Dom, expert diesel mechanic. Got in over my head trying to put this exhaust elbow on. Couldn't get some of the nuts off, so we ended up taking the heat exchanger off. And I say we, I watched Dom, held the flashlight. I didn't even do that. We've got the new exhaust elbow on, looking beautiful. Now we're reassembling it. We had to take this off. Dom had to take the starter off. What do you think, Dom? How are we looking?
I think it's going to go back together really nice, and you're going to be all fixed up, buddy.
You know,
like it never happened.
You need friends like Dom in life, let me tell you. He's amazing. Came here on vacation, put him to work right away. It's going to cost me, though. Big time. Beautiful. Let's do this.
All right, let's go.
So in about an hour, Dom was able to get the old part off, new part on, and here's a look at the nut that was actually corroded on. He used a cold chisel to get it off, but now I know the technique, so maybe I'll have better luck next time. Pancake says enough of this maintenance, let's get back to playtime. So we'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching, and if you like this channel, please like and subscribe.